insight with us. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. In Geneva, 2 significant diplomatic talks are scheduled. A U.S. delegation, including Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, will be meeting with Iranian officials, with Oman acting as a mediator. Later, the same delegation will engage in trilateral talks with Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has unveiled major EU support packages ahead of the anniversary of Russia's invasion. These packages aim to bolster Ukraine's military and energy sectors. Zelensky is also advocating for stricter sanctions against Russia. Furthermore, U.S. President Donald Trump has urged Ukraine to act quickly, warning that Russia is prepared to negotiate. Let's listen in.
Rounds in Abu Dhabi in trilateral format. We are advancing and we are thankful to our American friends, because without Trump it is unrealistic to end this war. American side, or under the American leadership, we could achieve progress, but in parallel we need to continue pressure on Russia. And we still have instruments, we must admit this leverage. And I agree with this assessment, no signs of willingness from Russian side for serious negotiations.
The security guarantees that have been planified for 1 year by the coalition of the willing and that are ready to be deployed through the headquarters of the multilateral force Ukraine that is based in Paris. There is no alternative and credible security guarantees. So we are putting pressure on Russia. We're supporting Ukraine. We're preparing for peace and building, for the first time in our history outside of NATO, credible and robust security guarantees that will ensure, when times comes, that the aggression can never restart.
Yes, we also need to be realistic. There is no such power in this world as American power. We see that now in conflicts that have to be resolved around the world. Without US involvement and pressure, it won't work. Without US aid to our defense in a NATO context, European security is not what it is today. So with all the trials and tribulations that we're having in our transatlantic bond, and I won't deny that there are some, above all should be our aim to keep this transatlantic bond, to keep the US involved in Europe, because it's also in the US interest.
Now we welcome Ms. Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international relations expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Dasgupta, for staying with us. Now, first, looking at the Iran-US talks mediated by Oman, what do you think is priority in their agenda? And of course, do you think as US ranks up their armada in Middle East, and they're also sending one more ship towards Middle East today, do you think US's patience is running low now?
Well, I don't know whether the patient's running low or not, but they're trying to increase the pressure by increasing their armada out there. But please be noting that each day this armada stands there in full ready of defense or offense, it's a multi-million-dollar exercise. So it's not a question of whether they can add another boat or not, and for how long. It means how expensive, without even firing the first bullet, a war with Iran is already proving for USA, which already has its economic issues. So the question is whether they can, how fast they can build pressure to get Iran to sign a deal. Now, what is happening, as far as I understand, in this particular instance is that Iran is ready to talk on the nuclear points. It is also, some officials have indicated to the US officials that they're ready to decrease their enrichment program, also probably stop it as long as US allows for a consortium of power, that power supply as such, that would power all of the Gulf nations. So if they allow a consortium of nations to form in the Gulf region and they start their own nuclear programs for powering electricity, and Iran gets to have say and stake in that, then they are willing to power down their entire nuclear program. This is the only condition they are willing to talk on. What Israel wants USA to put forth to Iran is that they should also not produce the ballistic missiles, which have now proven to have more than 3,000 kilometers of range, which puts Israel directly on the bullseye board of Iran if they want it to be. And they also want other sanctions to be put on it, that if non-state actors continue to receive succor in terms of arms or cash flow, then Iran would again be penalized. And as Israel has already in the latest meeting with Netanyahu declared that it holds the right to aggravate offensive against Iran if it finds that its own security is under threat. So these are the conversation points that it is going to move around. They would like a nuclear deal signed because the IAEA does not have eyes on the 400 kilograms that was reported to be highly enriched. I believe Iran has indicated, officials of Iran have indicated in a separate study where they said that this particular enriched material could be handed over to Russia directly under the JPCO E5+1 clause. But the Iranian foreign minister, defense minister, and the other people around there, official as in ministers, have said that Iran will not power down on nuclear. They will continue to hold the right to have nuclear energy as their option, and no country in power can ever force them to bow at such a level. So while the conversation requires nuclear to be at the center of all of this, I don't think the ballistics, as Israel wants, is going to be as much a part of this conversation. The days to come, it's going to prove to be very, very tough for both Iran and USA as they decide how they want to go forth in this negotiation.
Yes, thank you for highlighting. And last but not least, looking at Ukraine and Russia and US's negotiation that's also supposed to take place. So now that US President has urged Ukraine to act quickly, warning that Russia is prepared to negotiate, what are we to make of this? Is US aligned more with Russia?
Not really, though. US is aligned only with USA, and it appears that Russia has offered a sweet deal. Though what is part of that sweet deal, or what has been exchanged in terms of favors between these two great powers, is not known publicly. It can only be guessed at from where we are sitting. Probably non-interference in US action in the Western Hemisphere, which is a pet project of Donald Trump, and that would help USA stabilize its Monroe Doctrine, the Trump corollary, or they want to call it the Donroe Doctrine. So that would be a heavy enough incentive for USA to side with Russian interests. What USA ultimately looks at is the end of this war, because of course it is expensive. It is 4 years almost now into being in action, and no end in sight, no matter how much of your money and how much of your men are you going to push into it in terms of Ukraine. So there is only so much. Ukraine is in debt up to its teeth to all the other nations with the amount of aid that has been flowing in. Some of that aid is in the form of loans. It has to pay it back. So they need the war to come to an end, and when Russia is signaling that yes, it can end, USA would definitely side with the faction that is willing to show this kind of willingness to come to the negotiating table. What Ukraine wants on the negotiating table is the billions and billions that that 200 billion actually, that Russian Russian assets are in the control of EU banks. And that is a red line that Putin does not want to have touched. Also, if EU actually ever touches those 200 billion, that would be the last 200 billion of any other nation that would be interested into European banks, because it would ensure that as long as it aligns with Western interests and policies, your money is not safe. So what Ukraine wants and what USA wants does not actually align. And that's why it turns to look more like that USA is aligning with Russia. What USA wants is access to the nuclear plant, which Zelensky is very cleverly offered, that we'll run it with you as long as it does not fall into Russia's hands. What USA wants are the minerals in the Donetsk region, which cleverly, I believe, Russia has offered, that even if that particular zone stays under Russian command or as an independent Luhansk and Luhansk territory, you can have access to extracting those critical minerals. So it's a game of who is offering more on the table for USA. Right now, what Zelensky has turned around and said is that it is very important for Donald Trump's midterm elections for Ukraine to come out as looking as a victor of this war and for this war to come to an end. And he can make it happen if USA gives the security guarantees, which has already been given at the level of NATO, and gives particular sanctions which satisfies Ukraine. But Ukraine's greed for Russian money is something that is touching Russia's hardline, and Russian greed for Ukrainian land is touching Ukraine's hardline. So I don't see a progress until unless Ukraine bends the knee.
We will be eyeing that. With always great learning from you. Thank you very much, Ms. Dasgupta, for joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you. Now we move on. The Trump administration has unveiled a new maritime action plan aimed at revitalizing U.S. shipbuilding and maritime